are recording. We have everybody here. Holy moly, welcome to what I hope to be the inaugural first Healthy Poor #1, the first Healthy Poor Symposium. This is essentially a meeting of the minds around mental health in the hospitality and other hospitality adjacent industries. We're talking about how to be a better and safer industry where individuals can thrive and grow and be their best selves while pursuing their hopes and dreams within this kind of work. My name is Laura Green. I am the founder of Healthy Poor. Healthy Poor is an organization of me that I work with different other organizations, like, for example, Not 9 to 5, support staff focused on health, partners within this symposium, to essentially create programming and education that is safe and sound for hospitality. I am a licensed professional counselor. I work on educational systems and providing resources for individuals within the hospitality industry so that we can be a better industry. A few notes before we get started. I am a therapist. Dick is a therapist, but this is not therapy. If you do need help, I think that all of us are pretty responsible in our communication around these issues, but if you do need help, we do have some resources in the chat. If you are watching this from YouTube after we air, you will see it in the description. Check those out and bookmark them anyway, because there's a lot of really, really good resources there to check out. Throughout this seminar, you might feel things, you might have some sort of emotional response, and that's like cool and totally encouraged. If you were here for I'll call it our pre-show, you heard that we were talking about emotional responses being healthy. Feelings are your friends. They're roadmaps. They're roadmaps into your own experience. So pay attention to those. If you journal, jot down some notes to process later. Between this seminar and the seminar after, you have about 15 minutes. So, grab a glass of water and take a walk and maybe jot down some ideas. So, here we are to talk about the business of mental health and why prioritizing the well-being of people who work within organizations is in your best interest as a business owner. I will let you all introduce yourselves. I don't know, whoever wants to get started. This is really getting the gang back together again. I love it.
Back to the scene of the crime. No crimes were committed here, though. Other than just changing the world one person at a time. I guess I've just put myself in the firing line. So, hi, I'm Kris. I'm the founder of the Birch Project, which is a non-profit UK-based clothing brand awareness campaign, educational tool designed for hospitality to educate and to train as many people in mental health awareness as much as possible to make it a safer environment for people to work in. So we sell t-shirts and hoodies that raise money that allows us to do this. And started off as a local southern-based project in the UK, and now we deal with all over the world. So mental health, it's a thing.
It's a thing.
It's a thing.
Thanks for being here, Kris, at 8 o'clock.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, no, it's class. I love it. I'm so happy.
All right, who's next?
I'll jump in.
Oh, okay.
Nope, you beat me to it.
I should have appointed one of you.
Okay. I am in Canada, Toronto, Ontario in Canada, and I love that this is an over the world panel, global panel. So I am one of the founders of Not 9 to 5, which is a nonprofit organization that empowers hospitality and food and beverage industry workers around mental health and substance use support skills. We also connect the workforce to resources. And this year we took on the really wild task of creating our own industry specific resources. So we just put out a course around mental health and substance use support skills. You can link to it from our website, not9to5.org. The 9 and the 5 are numbers. And yeah, I'm someone that has lived with mental illness since I was a teenager, depression and social anxiety. As much as I do these things, they never become easier for me. But I love doing it, and I love being honest and vulnerable about mental health and substance use challenges, because I didn't have that growing up, and I always look at this work as a love letter to my 20-year-old self.
Oh, that's so real. I mean, like,
so true.
But so true. Like, I look back, I mean, I've been doing a lot of reflecting lately on, you know, when I started in this industry and how my relationship with the industry has changed over the years. And if these resources had been with me then, you know, and with my friends and my colleagues then, how very different things could be. So, yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, if y'all are watching at home, definitely check out the hospitality mental health first aid that Not 9 to 5 put together, because it is beautiful and like really, really, really wonderful. So definitely check that out.
And it was advised on by Laura.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, you made it easy. Like they all wrote this out and they were just like, approve it. And I'm like, yo, this is great. Nailed it. Dick, tell us.
I gotta follow that. Phew. So no, my name is Dr. Dick Loveless Jr. I work for Offsite Events and Spirit Marketing. I'm their research coordinator. But also for the past 10 or so years, I've been doing mobile therapy with at-risk youth and their families. And grew up in restaurants, families running bars, working in bars. And I just love the hospitality industry. I love what it stands for. And I love improving the quality of people's lives and helping do that. So as soon as, you know, getting the band back together from Tales and now doing this, I'm just so excited, and I'm just happy to help wherever I can. And no, I'm just ready to do it, and I'm excited, and I appreciate everyone's time today.
Yeah, thank you all so much for joining me. You know, Dick, as you brought that up, it got me thinking, you know, something that really informs my work with the hospitality industry is my work with families, the work that I did with families as a therapist, you know, looking at families. So families have their own little like cultural rules, right, that they abide to and they live within and they subscribe to. And then when you work with families, a lot of it is about dismantling that and understanding that, and then, you know, coming up, you know, working with that family to develop new rules that are maybe healthier, that result in better communication or de-escalation or whatever that looks like. So as I started embarking on this work in hospitality, while I was with children and families, I was like, oh snap, organizations are just kind of the same way. You know? Not to say that organization aren't families. If you want to tune into that seminar in a few hours, I would recommend it.
Oh, smooth.
Yeah.
Seamless.
Segue.
Didn't even see that one coming.
Like, I didn't see that one coming, and I'm just but like, Dick, I would like you to speak a little bit to organizational structure, how it impacts the individual, to get this conversation around, like, you know, business and mental health rolling.
Yeah, and I did the same thing occurred to me too. It's like helping organizations now is, I look at the other way, is families are just mini organizations. They all have their players, they all have bosses, they got rules, they got structures that they go by. And when you start talking about organizational structures, obviously you have your top down, but then you have some other ones that are team-based cultures, matrix-based cultures, and every way that you structure something is going to structure how people communicate, how people act, the culture that forms. And seeing people, especially when I look at the hospitality industry, it's very concerning sometimes when it seems like a lot of bars or restaurants that open, they're just copy and pasting from other sectors, top down, those types of ways. And really, it needs to go back to the point of saying, let's reinvent how we structure our restaurants and bars, because that ultimately can make a huge difference when it comes to communication. And we're really talking about becoming aware, but also like changing behavior within our organizations. And that, from a standpoint, behavior is a big part of anyone's behavior, is something you practice all the time. So if you practice being misogynistic, if you practice being, power hungry or something like that, it's going to spread throughout. So I think it's a big point to look at and spend some time. And I'm glad we're going to talk about like structures and how different structures work in different places across the globe. But if you structures do impact how people behave and how they communicate. So it's a big difference. It's a big thing to talk about. And I think it's a good place to start.
I'm muted. So if structures do impact how we behave and communicate, what and I guess that, Dick, this is for you or really for any of you all. How do the structures of hospitality as they exist now impact our behavior within the workplace? Like, what are some what are some ways that top down mentality, that hierarchy that we create and continue to subscribe to, how does that change our ability, one, to thrive, how we behave, and I guess it's become a really big question, how we behave and what we choose to put forward of ourselves and what we withhold as well.
So I'll take off a little bit, and people jump in. Feel free to run in whenever an idea pops up. But just thinking about like how a lot of us now need that you need autonomy to be able to do things. And I'm just taking, let's take for instance a top-down structure within a bar of how communication flows one way, and to open up those avenues where people feel comfortable to speak, whether it's on the floor, whether it's the back of house. I think that right there is one little thing that can open up just the flow lines of communication, because they're all very constricted into one ways. And you want to open up as many avenues as you can, so people can feel free to talk, express ideas. It's also not just about like those terrible moments, or you had a bad service shift, or there was a customer that went off the rails, which those are areas for bars and restaurants to practice how they deal with them. Because it's not just how you deal with the things that go great in your restaurant or bar. It's the awkward moments. It's the emotionally charged situations that need to be practiced. So it's about like putting leadership or levels of communication throughout your entire restaurant or bar or organizations where people can get you information just as quickly as you can get it from them. And it creates a flow where you're able to understand one another, and people have platforms to be able to say what they need to say, which segues into expressing emotions, understanding behaviors within your restaurant or bar, because they're all different. They're their own little universe. And I think that that's a way where you can just start to look at it and say, hey, where's the roots communication in our restaurant or bar? How do we communicate? Do we communicate effectively? And then how do we communicate in specific situations?
So what I'm especially hearing you say here is like I'm imagining like models in my brain of this top down communication, which disempowers people from having a voice, and so they are actively inhibited to speak up, to share feedback, and that brings in the premise of psychological safety. I think we are also talking about emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence is not just knowing what you're feeling when you're feeling it. It's also knowing how you are impacting an interpersonal relationship, what your impact on other people is, what their impact on you is. So there's a lot of pieces there, but if you can create a flow of communication and feedback that comes from the top and the bottom and the sides and all around, you have so many other different perspectives. You have, you start to integrate the entire person into your organization, all their talents and experiences, which makes you want to talk about psychological safety. So I'll point to you, Hassel, to talk a little bit more about that, and also the work that like Not 9 to 5 is doing around that space and communicating about that.
Yes. So I definitely think it's one of the main ingredients missing in our industry. After doing so much research around like workplace mental health and looking to other industries, I think that's another thing that gets missed often, is that like we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's other industries that are technically quote unquote doing it better than we are. So we can like adopt things, and that was definitely something I took from learning about the tech industry and the work that Google did many years ago in their studies around psychological safety and the importance of it actually being one of the main factors, the most important factor in increasing productivity of an entire team and the effectiveness of a team. So, you know, I'll talk about this later, but, you know, I think sometimes what gets missed is that there is a huge benefit, you know, financially for the business. Like, I love the title of this panel, The Business of Mental Health, because I think oftentimes we think of it as like a feeling thing, and it's really, it is, of course.
Or a charity, you know, like,
yeah, exactly.
Providing mental health care and benefits is like a charity to the people who are working for you. That's like,
no, it actually has a huge ROI. You know, that's been proven time and time again. So psychological safety, I don't like, I mean, I do like the original definition. I just don't like to use it very often because I find that it's much more practical to say it in everyday language. So really all it is for anyone listening that's like, what is psychological safety and how could I possibly bring that to work with me? Well, all you have to do is make an environment and a space where people feel that it's safe to take risks, make mistakes, share and receive feedback without any negative consequence to their livelihood, themselves, or how they're looked at. And so, for example, when you're a server, bartender, chef, cook, dishwasher, host, whatever role you play in this industry, barista, you know, the list goes on and on. Do you feel like you can safely do those things, share emotion, express your emotions, or, you know, lean on someone, or if you make a mistake, share it without being like, am I going to get fired because I have an anxiety disorder and because I made a mistake because my anxiety was taking over and I wasn't paying attention and I messed up all these orders, you know, am I going to lose my job now? If you feel that way, then there isn't really a lot of psychological safety in your workplace. So I think that's something to examine. And it's not, again, about like, are you doing it right or wrong? I think this is such a new term for our industry that we really need to like take it easy and be gentle on ourselves if you're a manager listening, and that like baby steps. You know, so I think just bringing up this term, learning what it is, and practicing is really hard if you've grown up in this industry, because I know for myself, I'm still unlearning all of the things that were molded into my head of check your emotions at the door. We don't have time for this. You know, your feelings, you know, is not important. And this whole pressure to like not be human,
Yep.
You know, it's just like, when you really sit back and look at it, it's a lot to reflect on. So that's what I would say about psychological safety.
Yeah, and you're essentially talking about how to build better vehicles of communication within restaurant and bars. And you're back to the point where as soon, like, imagine if like low wages or tipping systems were a problem in your restaurant or bar. Imagine if you had a level of communication where you practice where somebody was going to come and tell you what you need to hear and not what you want to hear. That's what I think it really comes down to.
Safe to do so, right? And that you feel safe to do so.
Yeah, and then also you're also breaking down barriers. You're creating more, you know, you're closing the empathetic gap between everyone in your restaurant or bar. But then it's, you know, sometimes you're going to say some things that are not in agreement with certain people, and to lean into that discomfort and to have situations where you can talk about the things that everyone needs to know about. But then afterwards, you know, saying like, I understand you, I see you, let's work on this problem together. And that's where, like you said, the first thing is like, all right, how do we communicate? Like, do we communicate at all? And what's the effectiveness of it?
And looking at conflict
that
as an opportunity, you know, like conflict, I mean, conflict is so often deemed as this terrible piece. Like, I mean, we can look at it from an organizational standpoint, we can look at it from a relational standpoint, a political standpoint, that conflict is something that is, we want to shy away from, we don't want to touch, we want to avoid it, that if we don't have conflict, we are healthy and in a good place. That's not necessarily true. Conflict is an opportunity to grow. Conflict is an opportunity to communicate better. Conflict is an opportunity to, you know, open up the possibilities of that you hadn't considered yet, because someone is coming to you with another perspective and you can meet them in that conflict. You know, it's not to say that we should continue to exist in conflict. The real work is in the in the working phase and then the resolution. That's where we grow. But yeah, don't shy away from conflict, but also, you know, in order for that concept to work, you have to work. You know, you can't just be like, okay, we have conflict, we are in a good place. It's the working phase of working through that conflict. You know, and that's true for probably any setting. Kris, I want you to speak a little bit to management. I think when I got on the burnt chef train, I was like, woo woo. Was when we spoke about management and the training that is required of management to really have a functional space, and how that is an area and a very necessary area within our sector that we work in that is profoundly neglected.
Yeah, massively. I mean, as both Hassel and Dr. Dick were talking about, like at the end of the day, I think in order for us to be able to improve our lines of communication and improve the cultures within our workplaces, we also need to educate the people who are, at this current moment, bosses, but not leaders. So it's about the education in terms of the fact that, I mean, it's you know, you can have people who are ruling by fear or suppression, or using their voice and their power of authority not to gain respect but to use that as a stick. Whereas in fact, actually, if they had, and we're not taught this within hospitality, you're not taught to show your vulnerability and show your weakness and go, well, actually, here's something that I need to improve on because I'm not doing it well enough. But if those people were able to take a look at themselves and go, and actually, do you know what? I have completely shut down 4 members of staff when they've come to me with a problem or an opinion, and I've provided this really toxic environment.
Mm-hmm.
If I changed my outlook and changed the way I did that and changed my language, changed my questioning, I would actually gain more respect from my employees. They would work better because they feel happier and healthier, and I would have a much easier job overall in terms of managing that team, but also just a better business in terms of operations, in terms of the staff's well-being, in terms of like mistakes and just all of those things that go with it. And then the culture is off the back of that, rather than you having to actively put time and effort into changing that culture, you'll start to see it builds around you because people are starting to feel more comfortable. They're not feeling so vindicated. They're allowed to express themselves in an environment, and all of a sudden the culture of the business starts to change, and it's a place where people want to come to work and they want to work in an environment where they're respected as individuals. But I think it all goes back to, in order for us to create this culture, we need to realize that the turnover rate within hospitality is high. And until mental health and until working hours and different industries have their little takes on this industry to improve it, we need to recognize that there's a skill shortage within the industry. And it's with the fact that people are moving up the chain far too quickly. They might be excellent at their particular section or their pass or, greeting at the door, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're able to manage people and understand what the unique perspectives of individuals are.
I mean, you're absolutely right. And as a mental health therapist, I started moving more into the organizational realm when there was a Chicago bartender that I ran into at Sportsman's Club, and I think it was Bad Hunter was closed at that time because there was a fire, and I asked him, like, what's next for you? Are you going to go into management? What are you looking for? And he was like, I don't think I'm ready for management. And I had this moment that I was, and this was, God, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, something like that. And I had this moment of like, oh my gosh, we put people in management positions just because they can make a great cocktail. And this person is a wonderful bartender, a wonderful beverage professional, hospitality professional. And I had this assumption, I carried the assumption that he should go into management because he was good at that. But he was self-aware enough to know that he wasn't ready for that position. And it's a very accepted structural building block that we consistently work off of, but it also leads to, gosh, pieces like imposter syndrome, valid imposter syndrome, like I shouldn't be here, and it's like I don't have the skill sets to do the job. I am exploited in my work. I'm working 80 hours a week to try to make up for it, and that's where we start to see these like really, really damaging cycles around management. And often it ends up being taken out on the rest of the team.
Yep.
Because they don't have the leadership, they don't have the guidance, they don't have the mentorship, and being a mentor is really hard, and it takes a lot of skill and it takes a lot of humility as well. And that's something else that if we are propelling people into these leadership positions really quickly, they don't have the opportunity to learn that. So I think we've done a really good job talking around, like, you know, building cultural spaces. And, you know, a lot of that is attitude, like coming into your workspace with an attitude, with a very pointed interpersonal and organizational approach. And that BT dubs costs no money. That's just brain. Like, that's just brain and ideas on paper and communicate practice and communication. Um, you know, so that's one thing. Like, reading books like Amy Edmondson's Fearless Organization might give you all some ideas. It's a really, really approachable book around psychological safety. Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. I want to say it wrong. Like, there's a lot of really, really great organizational resources that you can read and implement immediately into your organization that don't cost money, but will make your organization a lot of money. And Kris, you spoke, and no, I'm just talking, but Kris, you spoke a little bit to turnover. In the United States, the rate of turnover prior to COVID in the hospitality industry was 78%. Okay, 78%. HR professionals say a healthy turnover rate is 10 to 15%. Now, you want to see some turnover because it's showing growth in your organization, but 78% is like absolutely out of control. And the costs of turnover are far beyond like training hours, you're like $10 an hour training hours, and staff meal and product that you use to taste, and, you know, mistakes and blah 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 blah. You lose money in productivity, you lose money in guest experience that they don't come back, you lose money in reorder rates. You know, when someone's at the bar and you don't have a team that's cohesive in the same way that they used to be, they don't get a reorder as quickly, they lose what, $13 a cocktail. There are so many costs of turnover that can sometimes be up to like 50 to 70% of what someone's annual salary is. So if you start looking at those numbers of how much money your organization and your business can save based on staff retention, that is tremendous. It is absolutely tremendous. And think, when you are saving that money, what you can put that money into, like benefits, you know, like higher wages. Um, Something that I'm excited about this panel is that I have three panelists from three different countries, two different continents, and all have different, you know, structures on how people are paid. So I guess I kind of want to go around and hear from each of you about the impact of payment as well. And I guess this isn't something I prepared you all for, so sorry.
Well,
Sorry about it. But, you know, like the United States with our tipping system is very different, for example, from what the UK experiences. You know, the healthcare issues that we have here are very different from the UK and Canada, and create different environments. So let's
yeah.
speak to that a little bit.
I mean, over in the UK, we rely heavily upon trunk and tips to bolster up the lack of basic wage. I mean, most people over here, although they might on paper work for over minimum wage, they effectively end up working under, because they might be contracted for 40, 50 hours, and they'll end up doing way over that because either the culture says the pressure is big enough that they have to, or that's just what they've been used to doing. So it's not great. I mean, interestingly enough, one of the things when I first set up the Birch project was a poll, and the poll was, if you had a choice of making more money or getting a better work-life balance, what would you do? Would you keep your hours and earn more money, or would you actually end up going for a work-life balance? And the result was overwhelmingly 90% in, I would take a work-life balance. I would rather me stay the same on finances and take a better work-life balance than I would earning more money. So I think that speaks volumes in terms of just the small tweaks that you can do without actually taking on any finances. But, you know, earning more will certainly promote a better level of working, but I'm not sure it's sustainable long term. I think that personally, from experience, I think that peak will soon dry up and people will get accustomed to it, and then you'll be back to the same if the environment hasn't changed.
Yep. You know, and that's, you know, in the beginning of the quarantine period, I started doing some digging around why people leave their jobs, you know, why people transition out. And what people are being paid isn't even in the top 10 reasons. it's not even in the top 10. And then, and it leads me to reflect on jobs that I've had that sometimes I make a bunch of money, right? And I leave because I don't see room for growth, or maybe I don't get along with my manager, or, it's a toxic environment that I can't thrive and grow in. Those are the reasons I want to leave. Not, I mean, I have to kind of like rack my brain a little bit to be like, what was I making at this job, really? I don't remember necessarily what I was making. I remember how I felt when I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I would like employers and managers to really reflect on and think about when they think about employee retention. The human beings that are working for you, that it's not necessarily about the pay, but you also should pay them. That's, that's the other piece.
I mean, if they have less stress worries and less insecurities for financial reasons and home life, then it will take that predominantly off the table. So there's one less stressor within the environment they have to focus on, and it distracts them from everything else. So it's important. But I definitely, if people are looking for a quick fix and they've got, I mean, COVID, who's got any spare cash at the moment? But if you've got money that you are looking at paying your staff, then do so, but ensure that it's fair and that you're actually not just thinking of it as a quick fix, because there are other ways that require various minor tweaks that can also improve the well-being of your staff.
For sure. And also keeping in mind that, I think most studies have said that the prime hours per week that we work is like around 30 to 32 hours. I mean, people, if they work 32 hours, they get more done in those 32 hours than they do in 40 plus. So you might be paying someone for overtime because you need, hours or bodies there, or whatever that looks like, but you're not getting from those people what you really think that you are. Is if you were to hire somebody else and pay everybody appropriately, then you have a better mechanism. What was it called, Hassel? It was absenteeism and
presenteeism.
Yes.
Presenteeism, when you're physically present but you're not mentally engaged.
Yes.
And one thing here, so here in Toronto and in Canada for the most part, we heavily rely on tips. Our hospitality, at least service wise, obviously there's hospitality, food and beverage, other elements that you're not required to work service, but for service particularly, tips is a big system that is a huge part of your compensation, but it's very problematic, and I know this is a very controversial topic, and I don't want to take us too much down the rabbit hole of the tipping topic, but there's more bad about it than good. In terms of like the history of tipping, it goes back to slavery, has racist, historical origin. There's also a lot around performance and the performance nature of the compensation being directly, related to that, being super problematic to the productivity of people and the impact that has on you. In other jobs, whether you do, a job on a good day or a bad day, your pay doesn't like fluctuate that much. You still get like a bank teller getting the same salary, when they're having a bad day as when they're having a good day. And again, it's like going back to this whole idea of like our industry not allowing people to just be the humans that we are. And I think the last thing I'll say about tipping is that I don't think it's something that's just going to go away. It's so built into the DNA fabric of our industry. If you work in a, not talking about like Australia, for example, where they don't rely so much on tips, but like, and I know, for example, in our culture where it's so built into the fabric of how you pay people, I do believe that is going to take a long time to undo, but I do believe that that's the direction we need to move in.
I almost in the Symposium did a seminar on tipping, and it was like,
it's a hot topic.
It was so anxiety provoking even for me, but I think it's important. I have a feeling that tipping is going to come up in every single one of these seminars because there's interpersonal ramifications to tipping. There's, talking about emotional labor and BT dubs for the folks watching, or whomever. Emotional labor is often used to talk about sometimes like when we're talking to a friend or, and they're unloading their stuff on us and we are holding that emotional space for them. that's sometimes a way that we talk about emotional labor. But when I talk about emotional labor within the context of mental health within the hospitality industry, I'm talking about labor that you are being paid for or not paid for, right? So like therapists provide emotional labor. And what emotional labor is when you are essentially regulating your emotions for a specific position that you are being employed to do, right? So as a therapist, like my emotional labor would be that I would have a client that said something to me that I would have to be like, oh, that sounds like it was really painful for you. But on the inside, I'm going, oh my God, that's so messed up. Like that I would have to regulate that in relation to them. What we see in hospitality is that there's a lot of emotional labor that is being put in place that we're not being paid for. And emotional labor isn't just like that interaction with the guest. It's also if you have a problematic manager that's racist, sexist, homophobic, all of the things that we see in our industry, and you don't have the ability to speak up. So you have to stifle your emotional life, your authentic feelings and self in order to stay employed, right? So that's what emotional labor is, and I think that's a little bit what you're speaking to as well, and it's important to bring up. So when we talk about tipping and its relationship with emotional labor, it ends up being manipulative and really, really painful, and long term for the longevity of our industry, especially with the front of house, but also the dynamic of front of house and back of house with tipping and non-tipped employees. It creates all sorts of issues. That long term is not sustainable, is not resilient.
Yeah. And that's not even to speak to all of the heightening uncertainty and anxiety of not knowing what your actual compensation is going to be. So it takes away your planning ability and savings. I'll let you take it away.
No, because I'm like remembering all the points, but to your point is that everyone's got to lean into how are we going to define what a living wage is? And like even more uncomfortable is like, do we want a universal living wage? Because this dollars and cents, like someone's living wage in Boston is completely going to be different than someone's living wage in Toronto versus somewhere else. Like context matters. And I think what you're also talking about is what's really uncomfortable, especially in America, is financial transparency. Is everyone has a difficulty negotiating anything when they don't know anything about what they're negotiating. And there's such a mystifying thing about negotiating pay, tip structures, wages, and that's in different sectors and organizations as well. And like I'll give a quick example of a pie in the sky, but as a company that I had the privilege to be able to study organizations in multiple sectors, and they had an issue with negotiating pay. And one of the CEOs did a radical thing, and anyone that came into the organization got a spreadsheet and listed what everyone made exactly, salary rise, top to bottom, left to right. And they ran a study, and a lot of people were like, oh, well, if they know that, then they're going to ask for this amount. And it went the opposite way. They realized like, hey, if I make more money here, ask for more money, then I'm going to take away from this department, or I'm going to be over this person. And I think when it comes to tipping, when it comes to wages, like the first thing is, how are we going to define what a living wage is? And then we need to become more comfortable with financial transparency, because and like Hassel was talking about, it's so great to take these virtual field trips, or we used to do physical ones, where you're going to places that literally have gone through these same kind of struggles, whether they be in different structures, whether they be in different bars. I think it's imperative that we start exploring those areas as a hospitality industry to figure out like what works for us. Like, let's stop using templates from other places, start creating things that work for our worlds, our businesses, our restaurants, and our bars, and just making everyone accountable. But you're 100% right. It's just very painful, especially in the United States, when anyone brings up talking about pay or financial transparency.
Yeah, and I mean, people by nature, we have a tendency to catastrophize what we don't know, right? So like, if we don't know, like someone's not texting you. I mean, I can't remember who the psychologist. Oh God, forget it. But if we don't, let's say someone doesn't text us back, they must hate me. They don't want to talk to me anymore. They don't want to be my partner anymore. They don't want to this. We catastrophize this when it could just be like their phone died. Their they lost their phone in the couch cushions, whatever that looks like, you know? And so when we don't have that transparency with pay, the assumption by nature, because like evolutionary wise, we're like trying to grab resources so that we can survive. Our thought is, I'm not being cared for. That perceived organizational support is diminished. You know, that transparency, when you're able to see the full picture and know where your money's coming from, know where money's going, knowing where because it's essentially survival resources where those are going. Um, it's going to be so much more beneficial for people. But I mean, you're absolutely right with the tipping. When you don't know how much you're going to make that night, like I remember, gosh, I remember like nights when I was in grad school and paying for grad school and doing an internship and working behind the bar, and rent was coming up, and not knowing like, am I going to make enough to pay rent tonight, or am I going to make enough to pay rent and also eat next week, or am I taking my everywhere? You know what I mean? And that uncertainty is incredibly stressful.
And then there's the impact that has on your mental health.
For sure.
Right? Because there's been so much research around that, like your financial health and your mental health and the relationship that they hold together can really, really worsen, or help relief or offer relief. Mm-hmm. And so if you're if you have financial instability or insecurity, then obviously that's going to have a huge impact on your mental health. And I think that's also why I'm so glad that you bring up tipping and finances in, a panel that's called The Business of Mental Health, because I honestly think it often gets overlooked. It's a topic no one wants to touch. Honestly, I've said so many controversial things around mental health in the hospitality industry in 2.5 years. The only time I've gotten hate mail is around an interview I did around against tipping. It is such a controversial topic for people. It provokes all kinds of emotions in people. And I believe it's because of the connection to finances to mental health. And it's oftentimes a trigger as well for some people, because it starts to ring the alarm bells of safety or lack of safety.
I also think that there's the perception around tipping that it's something that we can control too. Like, I made my tips. I served that person. I did this. This is my tip. I did that. When really it's like it's the perception of control where we don't have control, and a misattribution almost. And I think that there's something to that as a reaction of, grasping at straws when we're thrust into a situation where we don't have control, we don't have power in a situation, we're very disempowered, and ascribing power to that where there is none. Christina Velci wrote something in the chat here talking about being transparent with businesses and around pay right now during COVID is especially hard because so many businesses are struggling. Especially here in the States, we don't have any sort of governmental support around closures. And it doesn't feel like it is that like bars and restaurants are being scapegoated for this, and I mean, there's more of that controlling an uncontrollable situation, right? That there's a guilt component that comes in when we bring up like, I'm not making enough, I can't survive, and the business is like, but we're not surviving either. Honestly, Velchi, I don't know. I don't quite know what to say to that. My answer is more to look upstream and be like, okay, so had we been more transparent, it could have been a better place now, but that doesn't help the situation where we are. Dick, can you speak to that maybe a little bit better than I can? So, because I kind of doom and gloomed that a little bit there.
Yeah, and I think even with like for some instances, just also stories of hearing organizations are dealt with COVID right, where you have options when you're talking about dealing with catastrophes. You have some people that lay off workers, but then we have stories of, I just read about a CEO was like, hey, everyone in the company is going to take a 2% pay cut, and we're going to assign everyone take vacation days at a certain time, because I'd rather have all of us suffer a little bit than kill off 10 of us. And it's about the decisions you want to make. And I think being transparent is hard because everything's out on the table, but you figure out that you're able to navigate situations better, especially the ones we're talking about wage, we're talking about dealing with those certain things. But I get it though. And even talking to a lot of, bars in the Chicago area, people are just mad. Like, there's so many things that have happened to other sectors, bailouts for banks, bailouts for airports, bailouts for this, help here. And I feel like, a lot of people feel like, hey, the hospitality industry is just taking the brunt of this,
Mhm.
and it's on the forefront. And you can really empathize with people's mentality, especially the ones that like early shutdown followed the rules, they did what they needed to do, and then at some point there's a survival instinct that's going to kick in, where people are going to be like, you know what, I'm going we're going to die anyway, I'm going to go out guns ablazing.
Hmm.
And that's where I think a lot of people are at, is like they're in survival mode. It's a bad mental space to be. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you start going into, all right, what are the things I need instead, and things can go to the wayside when you're talking about dealing with employees, dealing with leadership, growing your business. Everyone is at that point, and I think it's made it extremely, extremely tough.
Well,
Yes, emotional driven, isn't it?
Yep.
Rather
yep.
than logical based.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about how people act when they're desperate. Like in a desperate situation, the lengths that we go to get what we need when we're desperate, um, and what that does then to personnel, to employees. Who is sacrificed in those moments of desperation. And I mean, I guess you go to the Healthy Poor website, there's courses on how to manage change through crisis and stuff, and like you can share that with management. People should take that. They're really great course. I didn't write them. They're like through allison.com, which is A+, and a bunch of different universities put a bunch of stuff out. Definitely do that. But also, like, write letters to people who are in positions of governmental power. There are things that seem small that we can do. Because really what this comes down to, what I see in Illinois and throughout the United States in particular, is a lack of support from government, and the sacrifice of this entire industry, in a lot of ways, both as a scapegoat and something that's more in line with like the stigmas around working in this industry, um, the dehumanization of individuals who work in this industry, and the lack of care for them, kind of across the board. This is an extension of that. So, demanding support in that way is also an exercise of demanding support in general and humanizing the work that we do. And now I'm getting angry. Well, I was
I
getting
know, but here's the
my
thing.
secret is I'm always angry.
I was about to come
I
up with
wanna-
I was about to come with a positive spin too. So go ahead.
me, I got it. I want to plant a seed for
Do it.
what happens next. I want to plant a seed for what happens next, because yes, we're in a desperate situation, but out of all the tension and despair, always the adversity and resilience goes through. And all of us that are going to get to the other side of this need to really focus on reimagining and rebuilding, and it not being the same as it has before.
Yep.
And so for me, I hope that includes looking at people. When you're looking at your budget as a line item, people are an asset. They're not an expense line item, they are an asset. And what do you do with an asset? You invest into an asset.
Yep.
No investor in the world depletes their assets when they want them to grow and make them money. When you want to get a return on your investment, you have to put money and effort and time and energy and programs and resources and all of these other things into your assets. So if we start to look at, like, employers give more than 90% of their annual operating costs to people. So they're your asset. They're one of your biggest assets that you own. You can have the nicest restaurants, the coolest bar, the best menus, the best product. If no one shows up to work, you literally don't have a business model. So I would like to really point for the future, planting a seed that will eventually be watered and will eventually sprout. That needs to shift. That perspective of depleting people and taking from is wrong. You need to shift the perspective to be putting more into people, and that means wellness programs, that means mental health education, that means training, and like what Kris said before about how it's so emotional. You're right, Kris, it is emotional, and it actually needs to, you have to start looking at this, as the title of the panel says, as a business choice.
Yeah.
The business of mental health. It's a business choice. It's a business strategy. So for the future, again, when you're making a business choice on which credit card am I going to go with, or which bar equipment am I going to buy, you don't get emotional about these things. You try to put on your business hat. The same thing, I think, with workplace mental health.
I'm getting emotional listening to you talk.
and to your point, like what we're doing right now, where we've started to mobilize. And I think the biggest thing I'll say is a positive thing is like collaboration. And I'll call myself out. Like I wanted to help, Kris with a project, and I got sidetracked in COVID and everything. But it was more like I didn't want to help. It's just I need to help. Like we need to help each other in the hospitality industry more so than ever. Like, hey, I need help building this out. You got any time? I think we need to lean on each other too, because instead of going outside, we need to start to look internally and exactly what kind of stuff we're doing now, and come up with real systems that help make change, concrete ideas, and action items. So I think it's best time to do it now.
I think that combined, the four of us should probably sit down separately to this and talk about like almost the model rotas, the model performance plans, the model one-to-one reviews, the model behaviors that we want to see, and put together like 5 or 6 different models that if a business says, look, I just want to dip my toe in this and see how it works, right, okay, let's cut out split shifts, let's spend £20,000 or whatever the rate is over in America or Canada on getting another person to cover this particular fit. If you've got someone who wants to go whole hog, right, here's our suggestion, and you can take this, like issuing rotas 3 months in advance. I mean, Christ, if you're going to write a rota, why not do it once for 3 months, than having to do it every single bloody week? Like, just, and I think that's where we perhaps need to sit down and actually put something together that we can then go to the market with and say, look, here we go, we have a model here, adopt it, be happier, save wasting £81 billion on presenteeism a year, save your high turnover rates and having to re-employ and your agency fees and your wastage costs and everything else going up. Use this and we'll make your businesses better, and then you can pay us the profits and we'll reinvest it into more training facilities.
Practice it, preach it, create a field where people can get better at what they need to do. I'm in.
Cool.
I'm so in. I'm so down.
The three of you pulling me out of my darkness there.
That's a Voltron. You just got Voltron. You got Voltron.
Yeah, we Voltron it. But we went a little bit over, but thank you so much for this conversation. I learned so much from you all every time we talk. I'm excited for the rest of the day. We just got a comment from Africa. I'm like, I wonder how many times it's going to cry today. It's going to be a lot, and it's probably going to be recorded. It might be right now, but I just want to thank the three of you so much for participating in this and for this wonderful conversation. I hope everybody tuning in their respective places, wherever you are, took something from it. We have a lot more coming today. It's going to be super, super cool. We're talking about drinks education. We're talking about how mental health, how hospitality affects us in our behavior outside of work, oppressive workplace structures and how it impacts us. There's just like so much coming. Thank you for joining, the three of you, so much. And yeah, let's post those resources in case someone's feeling things, especially.
I'm going to post some resources, and thank y'all. Y'all made me better today. I appreciate it. And I hope everyone logs on at the end. I know I'm going to. And
yeah. I should say that too. There's also at 7 o'clock Central Time. Chris is not going to be here because he's going to be sleeping, but
I could pour a whiskey and meet you there.
I will Venmo you a whiskey.
I didn't even add you.
It's on me.
But there is a post-symposium sort of like happy hour, if you will, where all the panelists, whoever can attend, are going to get together and sort of talk about their impressions of the day and everything. So, what is that your wish?
Right, let's go. 16-year-old Scottish. Nice.
I got you. Look, I'm even going to change the speeds on my lights for that one. There it is.
Oh, you can tell you're excited now.
I love it.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much. And Mindy, go ahead and register for each chat. It's an automatic thing. So you good.
Thank you. And I can't wait to talk to you guys soon.
Would you call yourself an educated scholar earlier today? Would you say a learned
it's a conversation of awesome humans and a learned doctor. Sorry. It's a Step Brothers quote I always wanted to make relevant, and now, it's just great.
Here we go. Oh, cool. Y'all, thank you so much, and have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. And I'll probably see a few of you, I hope, in about 4 minutes. Go to the
Thank you very
bathroom.
much.
Drink some water.
Appreciate you all.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Cheers. Cheers,
Bye.
guys. See you later.
Bye.
See ya.